Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the work session of Las Cruces City Council. Today is Monday, April 26, 2021, approximately 1:01 p.m. Before we begin, if you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Excuse me. Okay, so for those of you who joined us for our work session, we're actually going to start with our TID board, which is our tax increment development district, which is pertains primarily to the downtown area. And so we have one item, which is the approval of the minutes from January 25th, 2021. So I'll need a motion and a second, please.
So moved.
Second.
Yes. Second by Board Member Flores. Okay. Motion made by Board Member Vasquez, second by Board Member Flores. Is there any questions? Seeing none, Christine?
This is on the motion to approve the TID board meeting minutes from January 25th, 2021. Board Member Abeyta-Stube?
Yes.
Board Member Vasquez?
Yes.
Board Member Bencomo?
Yes.
Board Member Sorg? Board Member Sorg?
I don't think he's on the meeting now.
Okay, I'll just put him as absent. Board Member Flores?
Yes.
Board Member Gondara?
Yes.
And Chair?
Yes. Okay, so now we're going to go to discussion items, and the first one is going to be the TID Operational Overview by a presentation by Chris Faber.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the TID board. Chris Faber with Economic Development. I put together a presentation. I'm going to share my screen and turn my camera off because it's creating a lag already. So let me get that started. Okay. Everyone see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to do something a little bit different than previous meetings. We're going to break this presentation down into three parts. I'm going to give all three parts, but what we thought we would do is start with a TID Operational Overview, give a little bit of background about how the TID operates, then briefly go over the current TID funded projects, and then lastly, move into proposed future projects, which we have aligned with all of the council priorities. And you'll see that as we go through the presentation, how we've taken our recommendation and tied it with council's priorities for each one of these different options. And then I'll be giving the presentation, but I have a huge supporting cast here to help answer questions. So economic development, sustainability, public works, facilities, finance, and treasury are all available. So we'll jump right in. So briefly, so the TID is created under the authority of the State of New Mexico's Tax Increment for Development Act. And it's important to look at the TID not as a geographic area, but as a funding mechanism, which helps develop revenues, which will then go back into projects reinvested in the TID. And those are revenues generated from property taxes and from GRT. And it's for projects like construction, maintenance, operation, public infrastructure, things like that. And the boundaries of the TID, here's a quick map for everyone. Picacho and El Paseo Main Street on the north and south ends, Campo and Alameda on the east and west side. So how does the TID work? So basically, how it works is there's three separate baselines that were created based on GRT, property taxes, and county taxes. And the baselines are set on an annual basis. And these were established when the TID was established. And so of every dollar that's collected above the baseline, 75% is reinvested back into the TID, and the remaining 25% goes back into either GRT or property taxes. And you can see the various baseline amounts that were established. So for GRT baseline, 3.4 million, county property taxes, a little over 200,000, city property taxes, just a little shy of $80,000. So if the TID does not exceed that baseline, then no revenues are collected. And also, if it doesn't exceed the baseline, the TID does not have to repay the general fund. It's just no revenues go into the TID. There was a state contribution that ended in 2018, and that was based on the bonding that was established at the time. And so that has expired. Currently, the only funds that are paying into the TID are local GRT and property taxes. And we put together a little history here of the funding from fiscal year to fiscal year to show you how things have progressed since about FY14. And you can see around about FY18, when the state's contribution ended, you can see that the revenues decreased substantially. So where we were generating a couple $1 million a year, we are now substantially less than that, somewhere around $500,000 for last fiscal year, and about $455,000 as of April for this fiscal year. We did the same thing to show you monthly collections from this fiscal year, so you can see July through April, how the different amounts have come in. And then what we did was, using the same 2.5% increase that was used to do GRT projections, we used that same percentage to try and do projections for the TID moving forward. So you can see our projections for the remainder of this fiscal year, and then for FY22 through FY25. And these are revenues over baseline. So once the baseline has been established in all three of those categories, these are the revenues that we're projecting to make beyond that. So now I want to talk a little bit about the three different funds that are within the TID. Here's a brief overview with all of the balances, and then I'll go into more specifics with each one. But currently there's about $5.2 million total between the three different funds: 2815, 4270, and 4271. And on these next slides, I'll explain in a little more detail what those funds mean. So Fund 2815 is for revenues and operations. So any revenues that are collected from that feed into the TID go into this particular fund. This is also where the money gets paid back for the hold harmless GRT money that was borrowed for the Amador hospitality project. And this is the only obligation to the general fund from the TID. And you can also see that we put up a little chart here explaining the breakdown of repayment over the next 5 fiscal years. And so funds 4270 and 4271 deal with capital projects. 4270 is unrestricted and it's still for capital projects, whereas Fund 4271 is restricted and specifically for TID street projects. And we'll show you down in some other slides how we're projecting to use those remaining funds. So of the 3 funds, it's important to recognize that one of them is for the revenues, 2 of them are for capital, and of those 2 capital, 1 of them is specifically for street projects. And so now I'll go into a quick overview of some of the current TID projects. We have the Campo Street Redesign Study, the Parking Lot 7 Bathrooms and Landscape Project, and the online permitting. So first, Campo Street Redesign Study. So money came from the TID. About $400,000 was budgeted. Moles and Corbin and Associates were contracted out to perform this study, and they were looking at cultural impact, architecture, landscaping, lighting, traffic control, ADA, all those various elements, with the idea of trying to make Campo Street more pedestrian friendly and make it look and feel like it's more a part of downtown. There was a stakeholders meeting, the first of which was held in January. And then we actually have another one scheduled for this Thursday, April 29th. So after the public meetings, they will put together their report. The report will be due to the TID board sometime this summer. And then the idea is that the design work will follow next, about 6 to 8 months to complete, roughly about 10% of construction costs. And the estimated construction of this particular project would be about $2 million. The other current TID project that's going on is parking lot 7. It is budgeted at around $500,000. Currently, we're waiting on a notice to proceed, which will be in the early part of May, and they'll be completing this in August. And there was a little bit of a delay in this because we went back and had Public Works look at fitting a larger restroom facility into that space. So we will be doubling the capacity than what is currently there now. And so now that all those changes have taken place, we should be moving forward with this project very shortly. And then lastly, the online permitting process, which I've been working with the developer on to complete. And we're currently just waiting for the public health order to allow public mass gatherings in order for this system to go into effect. Okay, so now we're going to move into the heart of this project, which is the proposed future funding priorities. And so again, I just want to reiterate that when we were coming up with these ideas, we took a look at what council's priorities were, the things that they really wanted to achieve. And then we set out to find projects that we could align with those that could best meet the needs of the TID and of council. And so we've identified 4 different projects. The Business Incubator, which I'll talk to you about in some detail here in a minute. The Amador Hotel Restoration, Compost Street redesign and construction, and then lastly, the Plaza shade structure. So we'll start with the Business Incubator program, and this is a program that economic development is really excited about. We've been talking about this for several months, had to put it on hold a little bit for some other projects we were working on internally, but we really started working on this in detail the last couple months. And the idea is to really just create a business hub that'll catalyze economic growth and be accessible to the local community. It'd be in the heart of downtown. We feel it would be great not only for City of Las Cruces, but specifically for downtown. Currently, we are working with purchasing to finalize the contract for a feasibility study. That study will allow us to hone in on a specific area of focus that the community will support and that we feel there's a demand for. And it'll also help us create a business plan that will allow the incubator to function in its highest capacity. In addition to the incubator side of things will be a retail co-op space. And this will allow local businesses, entrepreneurs, and underserved communities have access to a retail space for them to try to move into that phase of their business. We will be working with purchasing to finalize an RFP specifically for the retail co-op that will be for operations as well as putting together a business plan to run the co-op. And so where we are proposing to put this would be in the building that's located at 100 South Church Street at the corner of Griggs and Main. It is directly south of the stage on the plaza. We feel this building is a perfect location for the incubator. It's literally in the heart of downtown. From a retail side of things, the outdoor space plus the storefront would be excellent opportunities for the retail participants. And it also has a built-in kitchen facility, which would allow us to incorporate a kitchen incubator into this program. So what we are proposing is a budget of $1 million, with the purchase price of the building not to exceed $900,000, and leave a little bit of money left over for remodeling. Next up is the Amador Hotel renovations. So independent of future funding, there are currently 2 projects that are going on at the Amador. One is the interior demo, trying to take out all the more modern elements inside there, the studs in the wall, some of the wiring, some of that kind of stuff. And then the renovation of the west side exterior. Completion of both of these projects is due in the fall, and it would also allow the city to open up opportunities for federal and state grants for historic structures. And once these projects are done, then we can finalize the certification for National Historic Registry. So once the building is certified historic, it opens up a whole different option for funding for historic buildings. And so we're proposing an element of the fund be put towards this, and we've also created a phased approach to complete the construction of the Amador. And so I just want to say right off the bat that we're going to be coming back to you guys in June with a very detailed work session on this approach, but I just sort of want to give you the 30,000 foot view of what this would look like. So about $5 million renovation costs. We're proposing part of that come from some of the TID funds, and I'll show you how in a minute. And then we would prioritize the project on the CIP for State of New Mexico capital appropriations. And this plan would help us get the facility completed within the next 5 to 6 fiscal years. And it could be completed sooner, obviously, if we get additional funds from the historic registry or from the state of New Mexico. Lastly is, or not lastly, there's one more project, but next is the Campo Street redesign. And so this would allow the funds that are in 4271, which are specifically for street projects, this money would go to pay for that construction design. And what would happen is once we have that design completed, it would allow for faster completion of the project when there's funds available for the actual construction down the road. So lastly, we have the Plaza shade structure. And so over the last few months, city staff has been working to identify city-owned properties where we could take the electricity generated from the plaza and apply it to those other facilities. And so we've got 2 different options we could go here. One would be to use solar panels on a portion of the shade structure that would produce enough electricity to power adjacent city properties, like, for example, municipal court. The other option would be to use more solar power, more panels on the shade structure, and this would create an excess of energy, which might be able to serve other private businesses downtown via the community solar initiative. And so we will be working with the designers to come up with options for both of those and what retrofits would be required to accompany that. Also been working with El Paso Electric to identify peak consumption of the adjacent properties that will be served. And then community solar is an option, and it's being explored where the CLC might choose to become a utility provider for private properties within downtown. So that is obviously an option. So now move into the funding options for these projects. And again, just reiterating that we tied all these in with priorities, and we'll show you how we did that. So a few assumptions going in. We're using this money with the idea that the future revenues generated are based on those projections, those 5 years projections. And so what that does is it allows for about $250,000 to $500,000 a year beyond this fiscal year to be spent and still pay back the commitment to the general fund. So option 1 would be to include 4 different projects, doing Plaza shade, at about $1 million, and this would be Plaza Shade with no solar. And you can see that we've identified all the different priorities that this lines up with. Included in this would be the Downtown Business Incubator at about $1 million, using the money in Fund 4271 to complete the Campo Street redesign plans, and then allocating $500,000 out of these funds and $500,000 out of FY23 to put towards the Amador hotel renovations. These options here are $3 million out of the current fiscal year and looking at $500,000 in FY23. And this meets 13 City Council strategic priorities. Option 2 is Plaza Shade with solar, so that ups the budget to $1.5 million. Still keeps the Business Incubator at $1 million. $500,000 still for the Campo Street redesign, and then it pushes the Amador Hotel funding to just the FY23 component. So it's still $3 million out of this fiscal year, $500,000 in FY23. Option 3 is just the Amador Hotel at $1.5 million, the Downtown Business Incubator at $1 million, and $500,000 for the Campo Street redesign. Again, this totals $3 million. All three of these met 13 of the City Council strategic priorities. And again, just to sort of reiterate some things, we kept the spending at about $3 million. That way we could pay back the $2.5 million to the general fund. And this allows for about $250,000 to $500,000 in funding for future projects through the next few fiscal years. And then we have a summary of all of the options here for you to review. And that is basically the presentation. I will open it up now for discussions, and I can leave this summary of options up on the screen or go back to any of the other slides that you would need.
Thanks, Chris. We do have questions. There's a lot of feedback here. So can someone go on mute? You're not. Okay, good. Before I begin, let me just welcome Commissioner Shannon Reynolds to our meeting. He's an ex officio member, but we value your input, Commissioner, and anytime you have a question, if you can raise your hand, that'd be great. Before I get to Councillor Sorg, who's first, Chris, I just have a quick question on the shade when you talk about the solar or no solar. Is there a general idea of how much we spend in electricity in the downtown plaza? Do you have that by any chance? That information?
Mayor, this is Tony Trevino. I can help answer that.
Okay.
Chris. So that is what we're trying to, Mayor, this is Tony Trevino with Public Works.
Right.
We are trying to reach out to El Paso Electric right now to find that historical data for Muni Court and then the other meters that are situated within the downtown area. Some of those are the street lights, the park amenities, the plaza amenities, the splash pad and so forth. So we're trying to get that demand of what has been utilized in the past. So when we do design this shade structure, we design to what's being demanded right now by the city facilities. Okay. And then if you want to pursue it further, then we'll look at additional excess if you want to provide later.
Yeah, the reason why I ask, Tony, is in case council brings this up, I figure we'll just get it out of the way right now, is what if we were to, as staff looked at entering into a third-party agreement regarding solar, that way we don't have to pay for the solar, the third party does. They get the tax advantages, and then we get, of course, reduced rates, and then we don't have to add another $500,000 to the solar. Has staff looked at that? Do you know?
Mayor, this is Tony Trevino again. That has been discussed. We've had some conversation with Ms. Lisa LaRock. on this item. Once we do get the architect on board, because we kind of have some visual and kind of aesthetic items that we want to make part of this stage structure also, so it doesn't affect any of the visuals to the stage and so forth. So we once we get the architect on board, we can definitely bring in one of the others, Amoresco or third party, to kind of work through the situation, see what would be the better route for the city.
Okay, plus, of course, you'll need to know how much we're spending right now to see if it's, if the savings will be enough to pay the debt service.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let's go ahead and go with the council. It's Councilor Sorg, Vasquez, Abeta Stuvi, Bencomo, and Gandanas. So Councilor Sorg?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Chris, for that presentation. I'd like to go back to the slide on the Amador Hotel, the first one. There was a couple. So I'd like to see the first one. I don't remember the number.
Do you want the breakdown, Councilor? They have all three in a row that kind of compares them all, or you want the?
No.
For several years, maybe going back to a decade ago, the old Camuñez building that is now the Rad Retrocade downtown, I think was supposed to be exactly what we are talking about today, a business incubator with retail space. Especially, I think, thinking about those small vendors that we often see at the farmer's market, and then having a permanent place for them to actually have small shops where folks could go into, I think was a concept that's been around for some time. And so I'm glad to see that it's made a comeback. I always thought that was a great idea. So my first few set of questions here are around the business incubator. At first, I'm just wondering more about the concept, the actual location for where this incubator might be, if there's been property that's been identified to house this, any other more, just more details in terms of how many retail tenants there might be, what the incubation part of this looks like. Is it a private-public partnership? And anything else that might be relevant to making this decision between options 2 or options 1 and 3 regarding the business incubator facility. And that might be a question for Chris or Dr. Martinez, whoever.
So, Councilor, you wanted to know if the building had been identified, where it would be?
Yes, I just want to know more about the building itself, how many tenants would be in there, what the private-public partnership might look like. If the city's going to run this by itself, it would be partnering with the Arrowhead Center, or what type of development of this, the property, what that might look like.
All right, Mr. Chair, Board Member Vasquez, this is Chris Favor, Economic Development again. So what we are looking for and what we are proposing is to purchase the building located at the corner of Griggs and Main. Currently, it is a church. It is right there behind the Plaza, the stage, and it has that really great outdoor space. It's got great space right along Main Street, and so we think this would be a perfect location for this program. So we don't have a lot of the details established yet because we're getting ready to do the feasibility study that will hopefully give us more information. But the idea is that it could be a mixed-use facility. It does have a kitchen in the back, so we could start a kitchen incubator program as well. There's a lot of open space in the middle, the outdoor space, which does accommodate the retail elements of this. And so we're hoping that as we go through the process, we can specifically focus on the areas of interest that would be most applicable for the community, and both work out the mixed use side of things, the co-worker space, and the retail side. So I know Dr. Martinez is on the line there if she wants to add anything to this.
Yes, Mayor and Council, can you hear me?
Yes.
Mayor and Council, good afternoon. Griselda Martinez, Economic Development Director for the record. Mayor and Councilor Vasquez, as Mr. Favor mentioned, we are launching a feasibility study for the areas that we have thought of possible here. There are 4 main different quote unquote concentrations. One could be a kitchen incubator that we're actually working into a grant proposal currently to go to the Economic Development Administration. If we were to get those fundings, that would be the first one to launch. If not, we would continue with the original approach, which is to do the mixed use, which includes evaluation of a kitchen incubator, trades type of businesses, also manufacturing or like something related to crafts and the like. And then the last one would be creative industries, which would tie really nicely into the arts and cultural district, the potential partnerships we could have with other community organizations such as Creative, Las Cruces Creatives, and the like. For the programming of it, we would definitely partner with community members and organizations. One of them is, it's already our partner, which is Arrowhead Center. We have, when we started looking at the grant proposal for the EDA, we reached out to them and also to Dr. Nancy Flores, who's an extension agent at NMSU, the College of Agriculture. And we could potentially launch, even without, right now, with borrowing some space that already exists in town at NMSU or DACC, for a first cohort on the value-added agriculture type of business. So it would be an extension to the partnerships that we have in place, and the feasibility study would allow us to really evaluate the volume of potential users, what would be the optimization of the use of the space. And we definitely see the vision of this building. Shall the TID board approve the purchase to have a storefront on the main side of the building, and then move into the other elements with the rest of the building. It has, and Mr. Favor mentioned the outside area, and we could see that also being part of the space available for entrepreneurs, but also for customers who may be purchasing items from the storefront. So we are very excited. I think it would bring a lot of different elements to the work that the Economic Development Department is doing in partnership with community members and non-for-profit organizations. But also we really envision this incubator as an entry point to any entrepreneur to access resources. So, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Dr. Martinez. This is wonderful. I mean, I think to some degree, when we talked about doing some type of welcoming area, I think we called it the Mil Gracias room at the City Hall downtown. It was also meant to be a place where entrepreneurs or people that had questions about starting a business could go and get, direct information from the city, as well as resources of other places like chambers and business startup organizations to get this type of assistance. So this is like taking it to the next level. I think having that retail space available is really important. When we first started redoing downtown, that was one of my fears, is that we still had too many properties that were not retail or commercial in nature. There's a lot of churches, obviously, and office space, which is fine. You need a mix of all of those, but this is a really premier building to turn into a retail kind of walk-in opportunity that exists on days that are not just the farmers market or other special events downtown. So I love the idea of it being an interactive mixed-use space where you have vendors, but you also have that office space, maybe I'm guessing on the second floor. I think in terms of the return on investment, that out of all these three projects, I think this one to me seems the one I'd want to invest in the most, because it has both a social impact, it has an economic impact. It helps to increase the visibility for vendors that are starting up. That gives them a ready made customer base, folks who are walking downtown already, to be able to purchase their goods and those kinds of things. So I would say if we could go back to the page with the options, I think option 2, I believe Chris was the one that focused on both the solar and the business incubator as the primary investment opportunities.
Yeah, let me get to those real quick.
Sure.
Board Member Vasquez, I apologize. The lag is so bad on this end here.
No problem. No problem.
Let me just go to the slide that has all 3 of the options condensed so we can see. There we go.
Okay. Thank you for that. Yes, and absolutely, the Plaza shade is super important to me as well. I think this community solar that just passed this year, we have so many new tools at our disposal. I feel like that we are going to begin to explore with some of the new laws that were passed in this last legislature for economic development opportunities. And so I think I fully support the Plaza shade structure with a community solar option, whatever that looks like, either just for city buildings or for surrounding properties. I think that is just a really cool opportunity that says, as a city, that we're walking the walk. We're not just, we're both generating sustainable energy using the Community Solar Act, and then hopefully benefiting the downtown community in one significant way or another. So I think that is a great opportunity. The Business Incubator, again, I think provides a greater return on investment, as I see it personally right now, than perhaps the Amador Hotel does. And so I would just preliminarily say option 2 would be my preferred option to how to spend this $3 million on the TID. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Councilor. Who's next? Councilor Bates-Stuve.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Chris, for these options and for the presentation. One of the questions that I have been asking and getting more education on has been that of the Amador Hotel. And just to kind of see where we're at with it, the one thing that I don't like is having unfinished projects or responsibilities. And this is one of those items that is, our responsibility as a city, but it's unfinished, and looking at those next steps. With that in mind, and I'll bring it up for the rest of my counselors, and I know I've talked about this before to a couple of them, but it reminds me a lot of what Los Alamos has in Fuller Lodge, which is now its art cultural center, but it's used as a venue place too. And kind of part of the community. There's not a lot of places for people to go and get married or have those types of events. So the Fuller Lodge is usually used for about all of them. And so looking in, seeing what the functionality of this building might be, and then also our obligations, that's sort of what I imagine in my mind for a place like the Amador offhand. But I did want to clarify with Chris, how we have the obligation to this building, and I know that there are stipulations on us even selling the building if there was ever a possibility that we would owe money as well. And I don't know if you have that number on what that obligation would be.
Mr. Chair, Board Member Stuve, Chris Faber from Economic Development. I don't have that information. Dr. Martinez may have that, or Tony with Public Works may have that, but I don't have that exact figure.
Okay. And then secondly, I think that the most exciting project is that of the incubator. And I'm very excited to see what that has. In all honesty, my top options here are either 3 first or option 1. I would prefer us finishing up obligations and projects just before we start new items. And that's a personal preference, but I am open to hearing more from my colleagues. But I am very excited to hear about the incubator, and the idea that it can have a kitchen is, I think, so important because that is one of, I think, a lot of the limitations for home-based businesses with the food industry is having that commercial kitchen and all the necessary licensing for it. So it would be a really great benefit. And I hope that we're working with perhaps even our some of the nonprofits that work with food training, like Casa de Peregrinos, I believe, tries to do food education and perhaps teaching and helping people to make their own food. So those are just ideas in the future. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Before I get to Councilor Bencomo, Chris, let me ask you something. Is there a timeline that this money has to be spent by, or you just packaged it this way?
Mr. Chair, Chris Favor for the record. No, we just packaged it this way. What we wanted to do was try and spend the bulk of the money on some of these projects that align with council priorities, all the while leaving the money in there that needs to be paid back. But there may be some limitations on spending the money in Fund 4271, but the rest of it is at your discretion for the time.
Okay, I just want to let the council know that theoretically there could be even an option 4, and that is to do the shade, the downtown incubator, and the Compost Street design, and then come back, have a work session on Amador. I really think it's important that we know how much we're willing to spend total in the Amador. Because first I used to hear council said, $1 million tops, then maybe 2 million. And I think we just need to get an idea of what this is going to be. As you recall, for the members of the public, and even for Ifo and Ikani, and probably Eric remembers this was the county manager's complex long time ago. It is true, I did have a little tiny office in there, but I exited because I was afraid it was going to fall. So no, I gave it to the staff. But county didn't want it. Really, the city didn't want it because there's just a lot of renovations in it, and so it's going to take several millions of dollars. And so I just think I'm not saying, and I'm supportive of it. I don't know to what extent, because I think it's important that we know how much money we're going to put into that. So that's just an option. So, Councilor Bencomo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, thank you so much, Chris, and Dr. Martinez for the presentation. As my colleagues have said, I was left as equally excited about the Business Incubator. Honestly, I just feel like that's really forward thinking, and I'm very excited you all brought that forth. I have a couple follow-up questions around it just because I love so excited. And even just to Councilor Abeyta-Stuvi's point, I have seen so many home-based businesses pop up in the last year. Probably, I'm sure the pandemic pushed folks to do that, whether they had plans to begin a business or not. There's just this growth in home-based businesses, from desserts to candy and trust me, I know these personally because I love all of those things. And so, but I've just seen an increase, and I cannot imagine what a retail space like this could look like for some of those home-based businesses who could set up shop there for the weekends, for the farmers market, and just how much visibility that could bring to so many young entrepreneurs. And I don't just mean young in age, but I just mean young in experience, and what a incubator like this could do. I'm curious about the feasibility study. Councilor Vasquez has said this in the past before. Something I've learned being a city councilor is that we are often doing contractors and consultants and these kinds of things. And I know that you all are very incredibly talented at economic development. I'm curious what the feasibility study, what you hope to that will, I know you said that it'll hopefully solidify a focus area, but I'm just curious in terms of, is that not an option that you can do internally?
Mr. Chair, Board Member Bencomo, Chris Faber from Economic Development. So believe it or not, Griselda and I were actually going down this road a while ago, and we happened to just talk to someone who's familiar with this industry, is familiar with the process of feasibility studies, and they highly encouraged us to take this extra step just to make sure that we're looking at all the different options, we're seeing all the different things that are out there, and also to have them help us build the business plan, which would make it more successful. So there's so many moving parts, and as we went through the process, we were learning new things all the time and realizing things that we needed to incorporate. So it should be a pretty quick turnaround period of time, 60 to 90 days once it gets done. We feel it's an opportunity to make sure we're not missing anything, but also to hear from a lot of the stakeholders that will be involved, give them an opportunity to find suggestions and ways for them to be a part of this. So I think it's a great opportunity for everyone involved to sort of get on the same page, make sure we're all moving in the same direction. And then specifically, the business plan will really help us hit the ground running, so we know exactly what we need to do, so that when we're ready to open the facility, there isn't that lag. So as much as we wanted to move faster, we thought it was best to do this one extra step to make sure we don't miss something and not realize it until it's too far down the road.
Okay. Yeah, I understand that for sure. And I appreciate that context, Chris. I'm glad you guys have thought about that as well. I'm curious in terms of the budget you're proposing for the 1 million for the business incubator. So you said it was for the purchase of the building to not exceed 900,000 with extra for possible renovations. One, my question is, how many, do you expect a lot of renovations? I've never been inside that building. I'm curious. And then two, what about the budget to actually run the business incubator? Where is that funding going to come from? Is it from the TID? What will then that look like?
Mr. Chair, Board Member Bencomo. So the 1 million that we're proposing would go towards the building, most of it. We're in the process of doing an appraisal so we can get that exact amount. The remainder of that money would go towards the renovations, and part of that would come from the feasibility study. So we would know the building is internally in great shape, but whether there needs to be improvements to accommodate the incubator is what we would be finding out during the feasibility. So there will be some renovations that need to be made just to make it more conducive for the incubator. The grant that Dr. Martinez was talking about before does have a budget attached to it. So if we get that money, there's money specifically for that. If we don't go that route, I know within the budget for the Economic Development Department that we've put proposed funds for the next fiscal year for the operations of the business incubator. So we've got a couple different things we're looking at. It just sort of depends on what happens down the road.
Okay, well, to me, though, that is a project worth investing in. I think when we talk about priorities and when we talk about where is the city right now and what are the things that we really want to focus on, to me, something like a business incubator is something I would definitely advocate to invest in the long term, regardless of a grant or not. I think that's really important. Let me just check my notes real quick. Yeah, and just before I move on to sort of what options I prefer, last thing on the incubator, just last week at the El Paseo Solano ad hoc committee meeting, we had David Chavez come in, and there was a mention of the lack of grocery stores in the downtown area and the El Paseo Solano area. And I can see something like this business incubator really being a place where someone can come in and say, like, I want to open a grocery store downtown. I want to be able to open a place that can have produce and groceries for the people who live downtown who don't have to go for more than a mile or two. I feel like this is a really big opportunity. So to me, this feels really exciting. And last week, want to give a shout out, and I apologize, Chris, maybe you can help me with, there's a couple of ladies who took us on the tour of the Amador Hotel, Councilor Bedestubi and I, And Tony Treviño was there and Dr. Martinez were there, and they sort of gave us a tour. That was my first time doing that, I have to say. And I left the tour somewhat frustrated because I feel like, for a long time I've been saying, like, no, like that's a lot of money. I don't necessarily think that that's the best use of public dollars. But I left frustrated because the city owns this building. And now we have this responsibility. Either we let it go and get dilapidated, or we make it into something. And I felt frustrated because it's an expensive project. And when I think about priorities and where money should be invested, I don't necessarily think of that as one of them. However, just to Councilor Reyes-Duby's point, like an unfinished project, and now what's our responsibility to finish it as opposed to it just be lingering. And again, that's absolutely not a dismissal of the incredible knowledge and work that a lot of folks have done around the Amador Hotel, for sure, and preserving that history. For me, if I'm being completely honest, at this point, the shade structure project is the least of my priorities. Again, I think I had mentioned this the first time we talked about the shade structures, that I probably would have been one of the people to vote no shade at all. As I think about it, we have 4 structures that will provide shade. Then you have enough 4 separated squares of shade, where if you have an event, people will congregate. So then you just have this dispersed audience, which I think will be awkward. And I don't know. At the end of the day, I feel like we live in the Southwest. If you're going to plan to be outside, you should plan for it to be sunny and hot. But, as I think about this $3 million and where to invest it, to me, it's about brick and mortar projects, right? Like Campo Street design, definitely the incubator. And at this point, I do want to do that work session on the Amador, because I do want to ultimately understand. There's been a lot of numbers thrown around. And I want to ultimately understand what that cost will be. But at this point, for me, those are the biggest priorities. I guess maybe option 1 and 3 are best. It's hard for me to conceptualize shade costing more than the Business Incubator, given the impact that the Business Incubator can have on our community versus shade. And so, that's sort of, when we think about smart investments and investments that are going to ensure there is a long-lasting impact, to me, that's where it matters: Compost Street and the incubator. So I don't know if there can be a 4th option. I'm sure you've all thought of these through. And I know that I'm on the minority when it comes to the shade. So obviously I will support it if it's in front of me. But I just wanted to give my 2 cents. And I don't actually have any other questions, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Chris and Dr. Martinez. I got a briefing, a sneak peek, if you will, a few weeks ago. And so I was super excited about the various priorities. Especially, I echo, what my colleagues have said about the Business Incubator. I think that is going to be a game changer, especially in that area. I do want to just make sure that we're in sync with some of the other programs and projects. This idea of a kitchen incubator isn't new. It has been tossed around quite a bit early on. When I first got elected, April Christensen, who now manages Kids Can through Community Action Agency, was doing actually quite a lot around studying this, had hired a consultant. And so although a few years old, I think it's incredibly important that we reach out to those organizations that have already laid the groundwork, because I think it's there. And it's one thing that I do hear often about, with the city is like we sort of go off on our business, and forget about coordinating and collaborating with others, or that's at least the perception, and I don't want that to be that. So, Councilor Vasquez and I had been working with Kristen Aguilar. Preservation is a priority, then it isn't a priority, and so I like Mayor's idea. I think it's a great one in relation to having a work session. So I think one of the things that is important is that there are a lot of steps that need to occur, and in order to understand sort of the phases, if you will, that need to happen. And I think there is this consultant that's sort of looking at, okay, what really needs to happen, and once that happens, then we can phase out those things. So it is a costly, it can be a very costly endeavor, but a very important one. And I hear you about sort of these sort of projects that get left on the table and not complete. But this is a big project. So if we're not interested, this is like, I'm not going to even quote the amount of money that I think it's going to be. I think that's left for folks that have the expertise. But this is definitely a priority of mine. I think it needs to happen. But I also think the shade structure and the solar is something that I wanna pitch for. So at least I think option 2 is the one. I think if you've been on council long enough, you're going to hear lots of people talk about a shade structure that it has some art element to it, but also it feels, and Mayor, you make a good point about like, what is the energy? What do we expend there? And looking at sort of the amounts and what it would cost to put a solar, solar there. So again, I think I want to go with option 2, and just try to be mindful moving forward. Well, no, the business, the business incubator is there. Yeah, option 2, that's where I want to go. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Sorg and then Commissioner Reynolds.
Oh, okay, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to say that I was favoring option 2 myself, but let me add a little information on the Downtown Business Incubator. Like I agree with the other councilors. Yeah, it's something we need to have, but we need to have a good one that really helps people. And I wanted to share with the rest of the council and the staff that when I was in Detroit, Michigan on a tour of Detroit, and Mayor, you were too, perhaps you saw this big business incubator too. It's called Tech Town Detroit. Mm-hmm. I'm very impressive on all the things they provided. We probably couldn't have as big a one as they have. I'm sure we can, but certainly we could get some ideas from what they do there and install them into this particular facility. So I'm sharing this information with Dr. Martinez as well as management to use as they will, as they can. That's all, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Mayor, and all the councilors. You guys have made some really good points. I'm excited. I do have a couple of questions. How do we measure the return on investment that we've made in the downtown area, in the TED area? Has anybody actually gone back and looked? I'll give you the kind of example. What I'm looking for is we've actually collected 15.3 million in the last 7 years. We had a balance of 5 million, and our future is 2.4 million. What are we looking for to say the investments we're making down there are successful? I mean, are we looking for jobs? Are we looking for businesses? Are we looking for activity? I mean, how do we measure success on our investments down there? Because the Amador is a real good example. You know, if we keep the Amador and we invest and then we operate it, what are our operating costs and our return on it? If we continue to invest till we have a buyer lined up to take that property over. I mean, these are the things that I ask when I'm doing business transactions. So I guess I don't know the answers, but I would, if you have something like that that says, hey, you know, in the last 20 years during this TID period, we've invested 20 million. It's created 400 jobs, you know, 50 businesses and an increased tax base of $200 million or something. I think we should take a time to take that temperature and measure that right now, because as we move forward with more complicated investments, I think we want to be able to project what our expectations are and then measure to those expectations after we've made the investment. And if we can do that, then we have a sound business model that we can just easily justify an incubator. We can easily justify, you know, the Amador Hotel. It doesn't take us sitting here and going, well, if we keep the Amador, we don't keep the Amador, we invest, we don't invest, is somebody going to buy it? I mean, we should be able to project our expectations and then determine at what point we break even and what point we pull out. And these are the kind of ways that I look at this. And I'm not saying that the Economic Development Department hasn't looked at it. I just haven't seen that information in any of these meetings. And it'd be nice to see what our expectations are and what our results have been. And as far as the Amador Hotel, I really would, before I would move forward, and that's why I like option 2, is because we pushed that out. I would like to see what we expect to accomplish with that investment and at what period, what kind of return we're going to get on that before I would say I would agree with that. It's a good idea. Obviously, my vote doesn't count, but hopefully my opinion does a little bit. But I'd like to see exactly if we go ahead and put another 2 million, 3 million, 5 million, 10 million into that, what are going to be the results? And we need to be able to project that before we continue to invest in that in the near term. The last thing, the incubator with the kitchen and to class training, Casa de Peregrinos has actually said they're going to start doing some training. The Doña Cooperative Extension has been doing food training for several years now, both in people's homes and also at their facility. The New Mexico State Agriculture Department helps people to get approval and tests done on their food so that they can package it and create a business model out of it. And then we've also got the Culinary Institute on campus. And I agree with Counselor Gondora that we need to bring all of those people together and determine what's the best use of an incubator down there if we're going to use the kitchen, and see if they have some ideas so we can actually share their expertise and their time in helping to make this incubator very successful. That's really all I have, except to say thank you for allowing me to have input.
Thank you, Commissioner. We can probably get to those numbers here in just a few seconds. Chris, can you go back to the slide where you had the initial amount at our baseline and then what the city contributes versus what the county does?
Sure, Mr. Mayor. Let me get there real quick. Okay, maybe not going to be real quick, but I'm going to try and get there.
Okay. Those are good questions, Commissioner. Let me see if we can help you real quick on this. I think you'll be surprised with our return on investment. A lot of it is because the county was so gracious to actually help fund their portion. And this is a good exercise for our residents who are watching or listening. I think it was one of the first slides.
Yeah, it's getting there. My apologies.
That's okay. Okay, so the baseline was 3.4 million. And that was our beginning baseline? No, it was 88. It was 88,701. Is that when it first started, Chris?
So Mr. Chair, Chris Faber, again for Economic Development. So there's 3 different baselines here. So the GRT baseline is 3.4, and then you've got 2 other property tax baselines, one for the city, one for the county.
Okay, and what has it grown to if it started at 3.4 million?
So the baseline remains the same, and then revenues over that baseline go into the TID. So those baselines don't adjust. It's the revenues above that are paid into the TID.
And it was like 15 million extra that we've received because of the increase in GRT, give or take?
Mr. Chair, I believe that's what Board Member Reynolds was saying. I didn't have that number in the presentation. We could certainly go in and figure out what that total amount has gone into the TID. I believe it's at least $16 million since 2016, and I happen to know that just because we were pulling that up for the grant. But we could get a more complete number for you guys. No,
we'll go with. I think we'll go with 15. I think that's a fair amount. So if we take the 15 minus the 3.5 that we started with, so we grew that 11.5. And let's see, so divided by 3.4, so that's 338% increase right there. And our return on investment, if we started at 88,000, which just for residents' sake, this is money. Okay, so let's start with $1. So for every $1 that's collected in property taxes, the schools get 40 cents of that. Doña Ana County, I think, gets around 37 cents, and then the city gets around 16 cents. That's why the disparity there on the GRT. So that's why we're very fortunate that the county decided to give their portion, because as you can tell, it's a lot more than what the city's portion is. And so by doing that, if you take our return on investment, our initial investment is 88,000, and that's all it. Normally it just gets spread out throughout the general fund, but this was concentrated just in the downtown area. So my goodness, our return on investment is astronomical. For 88,000, we generated 11 million. So that's I haven't calculated that, but I'll figure that out. But that's a good question to ask, Commissioner, and I appreciate you doing that. So that gave a chance to let the residents know how this worked.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Yes, I'm a little confused because the number that I shared, the 16 million, is a 7-year collection of taxes, but your DRT base is annually. So if we did 7 years times the 3.4 million, it would be more like expectations would be 25 million instead of 3 million. So I think in that case, if I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. Yes, Dr. Martinez, please.
Yeah, if I may add some information, Chris, can you go back to the graph of past revenue? So the TID actually is a sum of all portions that are dedicated to the TID. So a portion of it is as a result of gross receipts taxes, plus the portion from the county on property taxes, plus the portion of city property taxes. So those 3 elements total the revenue that you see here above the baseline. So when Chris mentioned that each one of them had a baseline, when we created the TID, we basically said, this is the revenue that we are taking as our benchmark, and anything above that will be a portion to the TID in a 75%. So with that, it was the state, the city, and the county with their contribution. And that made for instance, in fiscal year 2014, the baseline between the 3 different taxes was above the benchmark by $2.289 million. So in that year, the total sum of taxes was the the initial baseline plus the 2.2 and in subsequent years as well. And so going back to Board Member Reynolds' question on the economic impact of the TID contributions, we haven't done an economic impact analysis. What we have prioritized in the TID area is number of jobs through the creation of new businesses, and also the improvements of property in downtown, which would then translate into increases in property taxes. And so those have been our top metrics for success. But the economic impact analysis that you mentioned is a good way to insert additional information into what we have done. I want to also remind the board that a big part of what we collected in the initial years up to about 18 months ago was a big reinvestment in infrastructure, such as the two-way conversion project. That was very, it was a big chunk of the money that we had collected and reinvested into the TID. So we are at the point where infrastructure projects are being completed, and then we're ready to set us into the next stage of type of projects, such as the business incubators and others that we hadn't had the time, or like we had basic needs as priorities before we got to those type of projects. On the collaboration questions, comments, we actually have been in close conversations with the College of Agriculture in the grant proposal that we've been mentioning. Not only Arrowhead Center is a core partner to that, but also the extension agent, and Dr. Flores is our main point of contact there. But we've reached out to Dr. Rolando Flores, the main person in the College of Agriculture. We also talked to La Semilla, and we're pending a conversation soon. They shared with us the feasibility study that was done back when April Christening was leading that effort. So we have seen that, and we have had conversations about that as well. We haven't reached out to Casa de Peregrinos. That's on our to-do list as well, and making sure that we are coordinating and leveraging upon the efforts that community-wide, because as Councillor Sorg mentioned, we need to make it a good one, and one key element to make it a successful one is building upon the work that has been done, and then building upon collaboration. So that's going to be crucial for success. I believe I addressed most of the comments, but if not, please let me know.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia. And Commissioner Reynolds, I added up those numbers that Dr. Martinez is talking about. I guess that's where you got the 15.2 million, because that pretty much equals that.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. Our return on investment was 115%. So I'm sorry about that.
You know what? That's not, and really, whether it's 338% or 115% or 20%, I don't. That's really not what I'm suggesting here. What I'm suggesting is the jobs we're producing, the businesses we're creating, the opportunities, the fact that we're bringing more people downtown. I think the whole model to determine the return on investment is much more complicated than just what our tax revenue is. However, I think that's something that we, as Dr. Martinez has pointed out, I think that if we expand that and understand the complete impact of what we're trying to do in the way of jobs, businesses, taxes, better getting other businesses to actually locate here, whether they're downtown or someplace else. I think that's what we're creating in this downtown project. So it's much bigger than that. But I think if we can get a good, clear picture of what our return is on these investments, I think it makes it easier for us to quickly determine where the money is really getting the return we're looking for, and what are we looking for. That's more my message than challenging the numbers or what percentage we're getting back in tax or where it's increasing. I just think having a profile to understand that model will help to impact the city in every investment we make throughout the city going forward. That's all I'm suggesting. And then we could plug in, well, we'd like to create 50 jobs. We'd like to create, 14 businesses. We'd like to increase the tax revenue and raise the property values. If we have a model where we can just plug those numbers in based on experience, then we can determine quickly whether investing in the convention center, investing in, the ballpark or whatever we want to do is actually going to give us, it's going to fit our model and give us the return we're looking for. That's all I'm suggesting. Is there a scientific way to do it? That's all. But I do appreciate Dr. Martinez's clarification and your comments as well. And thank you for allowing me to take part in this meeting.
Of course, thanks. Let's see, we have Councilor Flores and Mayor Pro Tem, I think. Councilor Flores.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Chris, for your presentation. And thank you, Dr. Martinez. And thank you so much, Shannon Reynolds, for bringing that up. In looking at the agreement between the DLCP and the city, the deliverables, there are actually three, there's an objective, of course, and then the scope of services. And there are three deliverables that are outlined, and each one has a subsection, 1 through 8, and 8 has eight subsections. And among those is exactly what Commissioner Reynolds brought up. In number 2 of the attachment A to the agreement between the two entities, the city and DLCP, we're to receive, delivered to the city manager, and I suppose a quarterly report, performance measures. And I think that's what Mr. Shannon Reynolds is addressing, that unless we look at those performance, we must look at those performance measures to see, so we can project what our, so that we can project and measure our progress. So this is supposed to be submitted to the city manager, and there's supposed to be outreach, and the numbers are quite specific. Promote, organize, and run 2 events in downtown. Coordinate with NMSU College of Arts and Science. A logo designed. An audio walking tour. And that, of course, should be, you should probably, well, anyway, the museum probably can help you with that. But anyway, and then as far as business development and recruitment program, which is deliverable/output number 2, it sets forth the quarterly progress report that will include the number, manner, and method of outreach to businesses with potential to relocate in the TID. Recruitment of at least 3 businesses, that's what Mr. Reynolds touched on, in the retail, art, entertainment, recreation sectors, training and or outreach of businesses in downtown Main Street that will promote and support the enhancement of visual spaces, yada, yada. So it goes on. And I think that if we could get reports on a quarterly basis presented to this board, we have a clear understanding of exactly how the money is generated. And the city pays about $100,000 a year into, or whatever we pay into it. But it really doesn't count as the money that the TID is generating. So I think that would be very helpful, Chris and Dr. Martinez and Mr. Chair, Mayor Yashima. If we had that information, I think we could really know exactly where we can go. As far as the options that we were given, I don't like any of the 3 options, because I feel very strongly about the Amador Hotel, and I don't like the fact that in option 2 it's pushed down to the bottom. I would agree with a combination of having the Amador up there. And the reason is just, to me, the Amador Hotel is just so important historically. And what a lot of our, even our city programs, our museums, they have some historical value. Without a doubt, there's many areas to go when history is concerned. But the Amador, I just love it because it's literally a concrete manifestation of our history, and it remains. And I hope that we get that national designation. And Chris, are you sort of, when you listed this, when you were going through this, I think you said that as soon as we're done at one point, then we could, the Amador Hotel people or us or the city, whoever, can then submit an application to the National Registration of Historic Buildings or whatever. Am I correct in understanding what you said? And that it'll happen once we're done with a certain step?
Mr. Chair, Board Member Flores, Chris Faber for Economic Development. That is correct. So once they finish the internal demolition, which they're doing now, which will return the interior of the Amador back to as close as they can get to its original historic state, then they can complete the report that will then be used to determine eligibility for the historic registry. So that's anticipated to wrap up in the fall. And then I think Tony Trevino had said about a year to wrap all that up and get designation. So at that point, it makes it onto the historic registry. That opens up the funding options on state and federal levels for facilities, specifically those on historic registry. So it does open some other funding opportunities. And so completion of these current projects is critical in that process.
And is it anticipated, I know that Dr. Dennis, Debbie Dennis, and Heather Pollard have worked very, very hard on this. And is it anticipated that that it will be? I mean, just, do you have any idea how close we are to maybe being designated a historical building, or do you have any idea, Chris?
Mr. Chair, Board Member Flores, it's my understanding that once everything gets completed, that there's a pretty good likelihood that will happen. There are obviously no guarantees, but from everything we're hearing, we're all assuming that will take place. Great.
And then, thank you. And then, as far as how I would do I would put Amador at the top, and for that very reason. Well, maybe not for that very reason, but that reason also makes me feel more optimistic about really working to get something done, and not reinventing the wheel every time we come to, because we want to develop the city. Of course, we want to implement that vision that our economic development. Thank you, Dr. Martinez, for your wonderful work in that department. And I think that if we keep steadily working and at least get one project out, so if we can get it, and instead of like building and building and building, keeping it to these 4 projects until we're all done, or at least getting one out of the way, I feel very strongly about the Amador Hotel. That would be my number 1 priority. My second priority would be the Plaza shade, and I think that it would with the solar panels. So it would be a function of having a community area where people meet, and that. It also brings tourism, because on hot days, people are just, the kids are playing out in that splash pad, and the adults are sitting as close to the shaded area, which isn't really available in too many places right now. The trees will get rid of. By the way, those sycamores, they've got to go. Those roots are going to get so big in about 30 years that we're going to be sorry. Well, I probably won't be around to see that. But we'll be sorry that those trees were planted there. They provide a beautiful shade, but boy, do they cause a lot of root damage. I mean, the roots they just go all over the place, and they're beautiful, but I don't think they belong on the plaza. They belong out in the forest and wherever they grow. But at any rate, that's how I see it. I see the Amador Hotel and our shaded with solar panels downtown Plaza. I mean, we really need a feeling of a central location, and we talk about it all the time. And cities that have flourished are developments, the newer cities that really flourish are the ones that have concentrations of people, such as placitas, and you need that shade, especially for people who are sensitive to the sun, and most of us are, whether you're brown or white or in between or darker than brown. I don't know. Everybody's susceptible to skin cancer, so irrespective of your skin color. So I think that those would be my two top priorities. The incubator, it sounds great. It sounds great, but there's that, as Gabe mentioned, welcome las cruces, or the welcome, the milagro, I don't know, mil gracias. And the mil gracias, I don't even think that's being used. And so, yeah, and all of these designations of what we would prioritize would be very helpful if we had that quarterly report per the attachment to the agreement. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor. And in all due respect and fairness to staff, they do give us a quarterly report. Every time we have our TID board meeting, they provide it with us. But
where is it?
Well, it's not here on this one. They're not. But usually that's why we have quarterly meetings, because they have to provide us that report.
Yeah. Mr. Mayor, okay, it's been a while, I think, since we received it. And I might be wrong, but we don't have a.
January was our last meeting. Yeah, you might not have been there. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. Mayor, Vice Chair Gandara.
I got a promotion. Very good. Thanks, Mayor. I really appreciate Commissioner or Board Member Reynolds' thoughts about it. I like the return on investment language, and sort of, I think because we're in the city and we hear a lot about this, but I think he makes some very interesting points, and I'd love to see, us pivot a little bit and utilize a system that we can say, because of this, we created these many jobs. Because of this, we have these many, the number of businesses in our community are thriving. And I agree that the money that goes forth, you can tell, right, in terms of the investment, but I want to remind folks that the infrastructure is just not doing the two-way conversion. We did so much in terms of water lines, sewer lines, conduit, all those things that in that older part of town, the historic part of town, that really needed that. It really needed that facelift, if you will. And it's those things that we don't see, which in turn, creates, better water system and whatnot. I mean, I don't know all the ins and outs, but I'm assuming that's a lot of what's happening in there. So I'd like for us to think about kind of those metrics, for sure. I think they're very important. And I would agree that the Downtown Partnership does give us quarterly reports. And of course, it's not a part of this one, and maybe staff can come up with a different way when they are presenting these sort of options, these options and others that maybe they don't have the time, that we get that report in a different way, so people know what the Downtown Partnership is working on, where they're at, something we should be really proud of, and how hard they worked just to maintain the downtown. We didn't lose really any businesses with the exception of one or two, and those were not COVID related. But Jenny and her staff have one staff. I make it sound like they have lots of staff, but have done just a remarkable job there. And I want to say that publicly, but I know that because I meet with them once a month. I meet with the downtown, with Chris and Dr. Martinez, as well, being a representative of the downtown. So I don't know, Mayor, if I can be more helpful in presenting, some of the information at our regular council meetings, if that might be helpful to the group. I've started to do that, and I did that last time, but last month. But I'm happy to do that if that would be, if that pleases my colleagues. I can update them related to this and the downtown partnership. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Or you can send the report to EFO, and then he can just disseminate it to the council, and then they can just have it.
Okay, Mayor.
Okay. Let's see here. Board Member Vasquez.
Thank you, Mayor. Just have a few follow-up comments, I think, after hearing from Commissioner or Board Member Reynolds and others. I think in terms of the question about return on investment, I think return on investment comes in many different ways. Sometimes obviously can't be measured in a spreadsheet or in financial projections or tax revenue, which is why I think, honestly, the Amador Hotel is an important cultural space for us to see through completion and to have as a community gathering space, or whatever the business plan may turn into. Part of my hesitation in investing in that property oftentimes is because that business plan has changed, I think, quite a bit over the years, just depending on what's envisioned, whether it's a commercial, retail, whether it's a museum type space, whether it's a private public partnership. I think that's still to be determined, unless I don't know otherwise. But I just need more clarity, I think, on what all the tangible benefits are to our community. They don't have to be monetary. I just want to know what the future of that building will be, and work towards that and invest in it. For the incubator space, gosh, to me, it's the greatest return on investment of these projects, because it really helps to spur entrepreneurship. If I'm thinking about this the way that I'm envisioning it, and Dr. Martinez, please correct me if I'm wrong, or Chris, but the Arrowhead Center serves a purpose as an incubator for businesses that are already started, that already have funding, that already have a conceptual product or service. Basically, if you have money or you have a business, you go to the Arrowhead Center to make more money or to grow that business, right? It's not like mom and pop incubators of, hey, I want to start a bakery, or hey, I want to start a jewelry business. It's like, hey, I have software to help track trailers that I've already shopped to 3 companies, and please tell me how to scale my business, right? So that's a different type of incubator than what I'm envisioning at the downtown. The downtown is much more of a mom and pop type of incubator, the way I see it, right? Where you're developing a product that you're working with your hands, or you're fabricating, light manufacturing, whatever it might be. And I think that's where that wealth inequality piece starts to even out, is when we give local folks those opportunities to create wealth for their families and their businesses that may not have that big upstart investment, that may not have 2 or 3 degrees to go with it. That those people who perhaps are already participating in the informal economy, cake baking, or fixing shoes, or those types of products. If that is what this incubator essentially is meant to harness, I think that return on investment in our community is really powerful. And that's why I think that is a really, both economically, but also to help with the wealth inequality that exists. And so to me, that one takes precedent for me. Again, the work session on the Amador Hotel, I think, is a great idea. I'd love to learn more. Would love to confidently say, yes, let's see this thing through because of X and Y. But I know it's gone through its ups and downs, and obviously it's a really expensive project to fund. So just seeing what that what that represents truly for our community is going to be super helpful for me to have the confidence to say, let's invest significantly there. I'll just leave it there. And so I think my top support is for the incubator. The shade, the Plaza shade structure, I think is just a great project to help kick off what this community solar might look like, especially when a city is involved in a project like this, because we could duplicate that in other parts of the city or other parts of the county if we're successful with this project. So interested in that. So I'll just leave it there. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Board Member Vasquez. Board Member Abeyta-Stuvey.
Thank you, Mayor. And please let me know if my internet starts cutting out and I will go off camera again. Thank you, Councilor Vasquez, for those comments too. I also want to say that the Business Incubator, I think, has such potential, and perhaps a way of thinking at if we move forward on this with our community partners is knowing that there's so many different phases of business. And say for a kitchen, you're going to have some people that are in the crafting, creating stage that need to be one place. And then you're going to have people that are ready on the serving portion and with that finished product that would want to be at the downtown area. So I think there's ways of working with those other community partners too, to see if it's something where are there different phases where people could be at or working together at the different locations. So I think that's something that could be really vital. And I think there are so many businesses that are like that, that would be able to utilize even both spaces. I think we have that need in our community, and we certainly have the bakers and chefs. I know that. And then my next question was going to be on the Amador Hotel. I know that we've recently had some issues regarding security and people inside the building that were being a bit destructive. And if we are to move on, whether it is for renovations or if we decide not to continue with the property, I do think it's important to make sure that we have the right type of whatever precautions are needed so they're not doing any more damage to the building itself. And so I'm just checking to see if we have that covered from the incidences earlier this winter.
Mr. Chair, Board Member Stuvey, this is Chris Faber with Economic Development. Yes, I've spoken with both Public Works and Facilities to secure that building, especially once these projects that are going on will be ending, which is probably sometime in October. I think there were some issues over the winter, possibly because of the cold. So looking to have a more secure facility come wintertime next year after these projects are done and the building is sitting, vacant for a period of time.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And then something like fire prevention, probably at this point, since there's so much of that construction and demolition portion, is that something that can't necessarily be addressed right now? Or is it something that they're able to work on?
Mr. Chair, Board Member Stuvey, I'm going to leave that one for Tony. He knows more about that kind of stuff than I do, and so I'll let him take it.
Thank you, Chris. Conscious Rebecca Stuvey and Mayor, we have looked into some kind of a alarm system for fire prevention. Right now, the item is there's no internet there. There's no fiber optic there. So we need to find some kind of wireless device to transmit this information. So we will keep looking into this as we move forward, and we'll let you know as soon as we find something that will suffice for this building.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And as I mentioned before, just with either way, it is a building that we hold in an area that we're going to see a lot of people coming through. Hopefully our downtown stays nice and vibrant. And I think it would be important to make sure that we're doing our part to make sure that this building is meeting standards for the whole community. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, and Board Member Bencomo.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Chair. Chris, can you go back to the option 2 where you have it broken down? Thank you. Okay, I just want to make sure I didn't remember what each of the broken downs look like. And I think for me, the reason option 2 was sort of automatically a no was because to me, it just doesn't feel right that shade would be a larger investment than the incubator, given the kind of impact the business incubator could have for our community. And again, I already said that, right? I think, I think we would be at I think it'd be a huge mistake to not invest in something like this incubator. I think it's an outstanding idea. And as I think about our priorities as a city and, really trying to impact and reduce the wealth inequality in our city, this could be huge. This could be a huge player in that. Again, for me, as I said before, I'm very, I've been very critical about the investment that we've made in the Amador Hotel. And I remember seeing that $10 million price tag. And to me, that's excessive. To me, I'm not okay with that, but I've been sort of assured that that's not going to happen. Even 5 million seems like a lot. But again, if it's going to be something that gets this building done and completed, then let's do it. I don't want to have the city own this sort of falling apart building that is historic in our downtown as we're trying to improve our downtown. I think in the long run, I ultimately think that it is better for us to invest in it. And so that's sort of where I'm at. Again, I feel like I'm not sure if his work session ended up being more stressful for staff than helpful. I just wanted to reiterate those points because I feel like economic development is critical for our city, particularly as we think about recovery from this pandemic. And supporting young entrepreneurs in their venture to start a business is such a great way to, invest in that recovery. So I just wanted to name those two things because I know I've been very highly critical of the Amador. And again, after the tour last week, to me, it just feels frustrating. And I do feel somewhat stuck, but I also feel like it is a project that needs to get done. Thanks, Mayor.
Okay. I don't know if many of you just didn't put your hand down, but let me just tell you, it sounds like the business incubator and I guess the Compost Street design are okay with everybody, it seems like. I will tell you this, and the reason why I go back to the courthouse is because and the third party agreements. And I just ran some numbers real quick. So let's just say hypothetically, the city spends $25,000 a month in electricity costs for that old building. It's old and it's not very efficient. So I would guess that it's probably in that ballpark. I don't know. It probably I don't know. Maybe that's too high. But anyway, so if we were to buy, if we allowed a third party to buy the solar equipment for that building, let's just say it was between $250,000 and $500,000. The debt service on that's like $5,000 a month, and if that saves the city $15,000 a month in electricity costs, that leaves us $10,000 a month that we benefit from. Okay, so I guess, and then so what I was going to say was, I wonder if we could, because I remember board member Sorg will remember this. I think before all of you came on board, they had staff brought us some really good designs, and they weren't as elaborate as what was presented, and the price tag wasn't quite as high, but it was anywhere from $500,000 to $700,000, and it covered the whole plaza. And now you couldn't put solar on top of it, but you would think that you'd want solar on a building that can generate that income, because there's not a whole lot of we don't use a whole lot of electricity in the plaza. So you would want it probably on a building that we do pay a lot of electricity on. And so what I'm trying to get at is, I don't see why we couldn't at least move forward with a couple of these items, have the work session, and I'm not discounting the Amador. I like it, but I'd like to know what the plan is, so we can kind of stick to it, so we know what we're going to contribute to it, instead of just kind of like, okay, well, we got this money here, let's just give it to them. That would what I would like to see, and so it doesn't have to wait until 2023 if it turns out. And then, without going into a whole lot of detail, if you guys can kind of remember a few weeks ago, some of the things that we're looking at. So it's more, it could be expedited. You know, we may have some things going on in the area. Okay, so that's one thing. And then if you want, even if we saved a little bit of money on the shade and still covered it, I still think it needs to be covered. But if you remember, Board Member Sorg, it wasn't a complete, but it was about 3/4 of coverage, and I thought it was nice and it looked good. It's just that at that time, council couldn't decide if they wanted to do a fourth, a half, or all of it. And I figured, why don't we just get it all, and then we could always cut it back if we wanted to half or a fourth. Those are some things that we could probably look at doing, and at least move forward on a couple projects, circle back to the Amador, and then also, I don't know if you want to just stick with what was presented, but I seem to recall there were some options there that was a lot cheaper than the $1 million. You looks like you want to say something, Board Member Sorg?
Yes. Yeah, I do have a recollection of what you're saying. I didn't think it was that long ago, though. I thought maybe Mayor Pro Tem was on the council at the time, at least.
If she was, she just started.
Yeah. In this option too, I wanted to point out something. If I'm trying to get my own information here to make sure it's correct. On the Amador Hotel, we have over $1 million sitting in the bank right now to use on the Amador Hotel. And that isn't shown in this graph, as I understand. And you're trying to show us, staff, that the $500,000 in 2023 would come from the TID. Okay. Perhaps maybe you were thinking that could be matching money for grants. And so it's possible, it's actually possible that we could do the Amador Hotel without any more city money than what we show right here, and then what we have in the bank. Am I wrong on this, staff? Whoever's got the numbers. So I'm right or wrong.
Mr. Chair, Board Member Sorg, this is Chris Faber with Economic Development. So the money that the city has right now is what is being used to complete the internal demo and the west side exterior renovations. So those current funds are going to those two projects. And then if there's funds left over, those will be available for some of the construction drawings. So those funds are, and Tony can speak to this if he wants to add anything else, but those funds aren't included here because they're already accounted for in the two projects that are going to be starting, well, they're started right now. So,
okay, I understand. That's all right. That's good. So I'm just got it straight in my mind, because we seem to be talking around this kind of thing and not really, it didn't seem to fit what I know. Okay, Mr. Mayor, or Mr. Chairman, that's all I had.
So was it Tony or Chris? If we were to do the shade and we put the solar on that shade structure, how are we going to power, if we did community solar, who would we power that electricity to? The downtown merchants, or does it go back into the grid? How would that work?
Mr. Mayor, or Mr. Chair, this is Tony reading from Public Works. From reading what just passed at the state, the community solar, the first initiative is for the PRC to come up with a plan by, I believe, October of this fall. What that does is going to provide direction to user groups, entities, of how to become a utility provider. And with that said, then if the city is wishing to kind of proceed in that direction, we have to follow what the PRC is going to be recommending to provide to some of the downtown private properties there, some of the businesses there. But as of right now, what the regulation states is we can only provide to businesses or properties owned by the same property owner and that are directly adjacent to the site where the solar is at. So once in the fall comes, we'll have a better direction of what the PRC is going to be recommending on this.
Okay, whereas if we did it on the municipal court, and couldn't we all, since it's right next door, couldn't we run if we had access to the small amount of power that we use there at the downtown area? I mean, the actual plaza itself?
Mayor, this is Tony again. That is correct. So what we had done the research on is every meter that is adjacent to that plaza area, whether the street lights, the plaza lighting, possibly the splash pad, and all those areas that are providing power that are city owned by that location. And if this is interesting, but that property that's going to be to due south of the stage just might be a possible building in the future to help retrofit with solar. So all this is, great ideas for that demand.
Yeah. And to the members of I'm sure the council knows this, but members of the public who are watching, if we do third-party agreements, then we don't have to buy the solar equipment. The third party does, because they take advantage of the tax credits. They get 30% off on their tax returns. See, the city doesn't file tax returns, so that's why we don't do it. They do. And then from our savings, from our electric costs, that's how we pay them. So they get a return. They get this tax credit. They get this equipment that they're paying for, but that we're actually paying for, and we get reduced electricity costs. And that's why I thought it'd be better if we went and put it on the downtown, on the municipal court, and then whatever's left over can help run the downtown plaza. But if we can also do it on the business incubator, that might help a lot and reduce the cost to the businesses who use the incubator and other incubator and all those around it. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I would, I'm just saying that we would still have the plaza shade, but we would have to pay for the solar. We'll let someone else pay for the solar, and we still get the benefit of reduced electric costs. That's all I'm trying to get at. And then that extra money, we can use it for something else, whether it's more money for the Amador or whether it's for something else that we want to do in the downtown. That's all I'm suggesting. So circling back, we can go with one of the options, but it seems like we're all kind of all over, or we can go with at least a couple of these, move forward, have the work session on the Amador, which that brings the third one into play. And then, or we can go have staff look at the plaza shade, but solar on the either solar on the plaza shade or solar on the municipal court, and using third-party agreements so we won't have to pay for it.
All right. Mayor, can I say something?
Sure. Yes.
Thank
Vice
you.
Chair.
Thank you, Chair Mihigashima. I wanted to just say two things. I keep forgetting the 2 times I've spoken already. Is that one of the things that I talked to Chris and Dr. Martinez about related to the Amador was, and I think people alluded to this, is this idea of a master plan. We keep changing kind of what is happening, and I think it's hard to sort of conceptualize what that might look like. And so I really believe that if we're going to have a work session, that be part of the recommendation, that a master plan is done, so that we include a number of partners. During COVID, at different times I've brought groups together, like the Downtown Partnership, the Arts and Cultural District, the Doniana Arts Council, to include the people at the Amador, and had sort of this dialogue about working together for the betterment of the Amador. What might it look like to partner and to maybe rent space from there, those kinds, just trying to get, to thinking more creatively about how that space can be used in addition to whatever else folks think that it needs to be used as. And so I agree that it's really hard to conceptualize when there's sort of the bullseye moves, if you will. And I also want to remind folks that, as Councilor Abeyta-Stuvy indicated, this is one of our facilities. We have to care for our facilities, and we've put a lot of in-kind, and typically the funding in the past has come from the capital outlay from the legislators. So I also want to remind people that is an option, that we can continue to ask the legislators for funding as it relates to this. But I think this is genuinely a good step forward, a sincere effort that we care about historic preservation and the Amador. And so I just wanted to share those two things, Mayor, with you all.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Reynolds, did you have a question, or did you forget to put your hand down?
No, I had one more question, and I'm just curious about something. I think this goes to Tony. The question does. Tony, I think you mentioned something earlier, either you or Chris, but I think it was you, about trying to get the actual numbers on how much energy was necessary from El Paso Electric for the solar implementation. And you said that it might take a couple of months. Is that correct?
Chair, Miss Board Member Reynolds, this is Tony again. Yes, we reached out to El Paso Electric a couple of weeks ago, and having trying to go through their routes to gather that information. So I am hoping within the next couple of weeks we should get some of that information from them. They're having to go through their backlogs, and also we're trying to coordinate with Ms. Lisa LaRock, our sustainability officer, to kind of get that information also. So we're trying to approach it as a team to get that information. So when we do design it, we design it to the demand, and not design it and pay the extra and create excess power and just put it back into the grid without getting any kind of benefit from that or credit on that part. So,
okay, thank you. I think that's what I heard. The reason I asked that question is because, as the mayor's pointed out, if we did have a third party responsible for the solar portion of this, two things. I mean, number one is we could begin by implementing simply the infrastructure to support solar and a couple of panels to handle the plaza, okay, or whatever the minimal needs are. And then as we determine and have the lines implemented, we could actually then expand the solar because the biggest cost of the infrastructure is put in there with the initial implementation. Then we could actually add additional panels ad hoc as we needed them, which would make this a more manageable project and also be able to get it off the ground quicker at a less cost. And then we could, once we get it started, we could then look for someone to possibly, purchase that portion of it if we needed to as well. So I don't know how all that works, but I think having those numbers is what El Paso Electric anticipates our needs are going to be, is really the first step as to determine how we move forward with the solar, whether it's on the plaza, whether it's on the hotel, whether it's on the court or what, is understanding what our needs are first. And so I think we got to back up a little bit on that to understand that first is my recommendation and my thoughts. But I do like the idea of community solar and having someone else get the benefit rather than the city, and providing a PPP, a public partner, private partnership in order to make that benefit several people in the process. So I think it's a good idea. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, so Chris or Tony, so remind me, or Christine, approvals for infrastructure, does that go back to the city council or does it come through the TID again? So my question is, if we're going to move forward, is it going to be move forward so that our next TID board meeting, we make these approvals for what we're going to do, or is that going to go to the city council?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
This is Griselda Martinez for the record. The TID board would approve the budgetary items
Okay.
within the TID.
Okay, so what you would like from us today is some direction so that when we have, are you going to want us to have a special TID meeting like in a month from now to approve this, or did you want to wait for 3 more months?
Mr. Chair, thank you for that question. We would appreciate more guidance based on the discussion and your recommendation. What we could do is on the Plaza shade structure and the Amador Hotel, we can bring those 2 items for work session, similar to what we did in the overall of the TID, to give history, to give estimated cost forecasted, and then based on that information, we can have a further discussions related to the TID funding, and for us to right now prioritize those 2 projects that the TID board has consensus on, which are the Business Incubator and the design for Campo Street, if that's what I'm hearing from the discussion.
Yes, Dr. Martinez. One thing that just popped into my mind after listening to the discussion. So let's just say we did go with the Plaza shade with solar, but we're wiring it or retrofit it so that if we did do community solar, and let's say we did so large of a community solar that we were able to offer to the business owners along the Plaza area, let's say they only had to pay 50% or 70% of what their electric bill is. I wonder if there was a way to do that collectively, and then we can still attract a third-party agreement to pay for that solar as well. That way there, we don't have to pay for it or minimal amount, the retrofitting. The business owners will like it because they'll have a reduced cost in solar costs, and that makes it a little bit more attractive to bring businesses to come down to the downtown area. And we get, we benefit all the way around. So that might be something to look at.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if it's worthwhile trying to figure this out now. Let's wait till the state gets the community solar all figured out with the PRC and all, and then discuss that. But we could still talk about what kind of a shade structure would look like in a work session now. But try to get the details now. They might have something that we couldn't agree with, or it wouldn't work for us, I should say.
Yeah. So let's move forward at least with the downtown incubator and the Campo Street design. We'll have a special work session on the Amador. And then also, if you could work on that Plaza shade with the possible retrofit for community solar, I think might not be a bad idea. What do you all think?
Yeah, I agree with that.
You guys want to just, okay, your thumbs up from Commissioner Reynolds. Anybody else?
My vote doesn't count.
No, I know it doesn't count, but at least
I'm
it's
good with that.
Board Member Vasquez. Anybody? Did somebody else put their hand up? Okay, Board Member Bencomo. So there you go. So I'm not saying that the others aren't going to come into play. It's just that we give them something to start working on now. The incubator and the Campo Street design. We do the Amador Hotel in a month or 2. Then we can see about that and move forward with that as well. And then also by that time, we'll know more on the numbers from El Paso Electric regarding the shade. So I'm not saying that none of these. So I guess if I was to circle back, it would probably look like number 2, but without the Amador necessarily having to go to 2023. It's just we're just probably delaying it a couple months, so we can get the work session, so we can get it more clarified as to what the actual plan is. give or take in the next few months. Sound okay? Yep. Okay, I guess we'll just do that. You got that, Chris? We're good?
Mr. Chair, yeah, that sounds good. That's good direction for staff. And just to let the board know, we have that work session for the Amador already scheduled for June 14th.
Perfect. Sounds good. Okay, anything else for the TID?
Mr. Chair, not for me.
Okay, I'll need a motion and a second so we can
Move to
adjourn.
adjourn.
Second, Gandara.
Motion made by Board Member Stork, second by Vice Chair Gandara, that we adjourn. Christine?
This is on the motion to adjourn the TID board meeting. Board Member Abeyta-Stuvey,
Yes.
Board Member Vasquez,
Yes.
Board Member Bencomo,
Yes.
Board Member Sorg,
Yes.
Board Member Flores,
Yes.
Board Member Gandara,
Yes.
Chair.
Yes. Okay, it's 3:10 p.m. We're adjourned. Stand by for a few minutes and then we'll start with our work session. Lost